hitting the ground running. I like that. So, Kate, you're also a Garmento in the clothing world.
Yeah. Yep. So I started Cloud Room, which is a kids' clothing brand. Here are 2 samples of the clothes we have out now. We're making toddler t-shirts in 100% organic Pima cotton, and Pima cotton is really high quality. It's got a really long staple, which means it's really smooth. It doesn't pill easily.
It's very smooth.
Yeah, super soft, super cozy. It also makes it really durable, which is great for particularly kids' clothes that get washed all the time.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And you chose a good thickness. Like a lot of Pima cottons are like the really kind of thinner shirts, but this has this little bit of heft to it.
Yeah, those are cute designs too. Did you do the designs or did you like work with someone to make the actual like drawings and stuff?
I worked with somebody. So part of the brand perspective is to work with smaller designers who do creative things, the kind of designs you'd want to have on a print on your wall, for example.
Cool.
And get them to make some fun, creative clothes for kids.
Yeah.
Something that's a little different than what you're going to see every day.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. You know what I mean? The attention to detail is really there by having every square inch covered by it. I love that.
Thanks.
What was your kind of production like run like? Because we did it 2 different ways. My way was just chaotically like continuing to get it. And then like doing something myself. You actually went like the more traditional route of like communicating with a manufacturer, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So these are manufactured in Peru. And so I worked with a factory there using like a middleman and troubleshooted like designs, got samples, picked among a variety of different fabrics, and then had them like made a minimum order and then had them send that to me. And then from there, I have stock essentially. So instead of making them like one-off by myself in my house, I have like a stock sitting there ready to go.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll just aim this a little bit. You can move it too. You really don't have to move up to it. Is it odd kind of be like taking a risk on yourself? Like, or,
yeah.
like,
How did you get into this? Like, what's your background or how did you get here? I guess.
It's not fashion. I can tell you that.
Really?
Yeah, I just having kids and being like loving to dress them and put them in clothes that they like and that I also like. It's kind of shocking how boring some kids' clothes can be. I mean, in the same way that a lot of adults' clothes can be really boring and lack personality. So just being passionate about it and then feeling like, you know, I could probably do this. You know, I think that's a little bit of ego there. It was a crazy like task to take on, but
you gotta have some sort of ego to say I'm gonna make any sort of difference in the world.
It's true.
I like it also because it's covered like every square inch. Like my design, like I like, you know, I make like an adult version of these where it's all cotton because a lot of kids clothes is a lot of all clothes is plastic. Where it's like the joke is I like kind of think of it as like people just take a plastic bag like from a grocery store and just like put their kid in it at the beginning of the day. And I'm just like, man, that cannot be good for us.
Yeah, the like graphic tee is the predominant design. Those are like the easiest to make. I think that's why these are more complicated because you have to print the fabric first and then cut them instead of making what are called like blanks.
Totally.
And then just designing the blanks.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And so is this like water-based screen printing? Because there's no feel to it. So then they make it on the fabric. They wash the fabric because there's like not even that like residue. Like normally screen
that's
printing,
what's so impressive
water-based
to me about it.
until like one wash. There's like some sort of feel to it.
Yeah.
I mean that's just great. And I mean you made it for yourself or like your kids, which is really how like good products are made. So did you take design like feedback from them of like?
I took design feedback from the graphic designer who did the artwork and then also the pattern designer who designed the actual clothing. So I worked with 2 people in that part. I can't even sew, so I've been having somebody hold my hand through this whole process. And that's also been a huge learning curve. It's like how clothing is made, which is super fun, but it's
like so
not my
was this
wheelhouse.
a decision of like the flat lock stitch on the collar? Because like you know some shirts, cheaper shirts don't have any or just different designs really, but like a lot of them do have that sort of you know nice ribbon collar.
Exactly. Yeah. And the same with the like flat tag right there. That's for comfort. A lot of kids' clothes have like raised tags or fabric tags, and that could be really uncomfortable or irritate sensitive skin. So having something that's really soft and then minimal tags, minimal irritation points.
I really hardly think of myself as a sensitive person, but I have to rip the tags off all my shirts or else I'm like, they're quite uncomfortable. It's like, it's not like a knitted, like it's not like a little bit of jersey back there. It's like actually like a weird cloth that I'm like, why do they do this?
I know. And especially when they're like stitched, they're so rough. You're like, oh, I don't want that on my neck all day.
No, and then you kind of have to risk like breaking the shirt to take it out. Like you have to have one of those little tools. Like,
oh, that's the worst when you go to rip out a tag and now your shirt's like,
you've got a hole.
There's many shirts that I've like taken these and just like slowly gone through them with.
Oh man, yeah, that's a hard process.
Yeah, and so this is a risk you're taking, but your day job is
I'm a lawyer.
What a world of difference.
Yeah, it's entirely different. So it's been quite an adventure, I'll say that.
Yeah, how long have you been doing the shirts? Or
I came up with the idea in 2022, and then it took me a year to find a factory, get them made, and get them here. Because getting them shipped here was also like a whole adventure in and of itself. So it took about a year. And then
it's really pretty fast, honestly, for never like doing this before. I'm pretty impressed. Yeah.
It was helpful. I like networked through some of the manufacturing part, and that was essential. It's very much like a business that relies on like being vouched for, especially because you're working over a lot of international borders, and language barriers.
Oof.
And so you went with Peru. What was kind of decision making in that, and how to go? Because I guess either you have to pay them ahead of time, they could just take your money and you're screwed. Because you can't really sue people across country borders, is my understanding.
Yeah, it would be hard. I'd have to go there.
Yeah. And then the other one is they deliver. So like the money, was there a third part? What's it called?
Like a third party that a middleman.
A trust, or what is? Yeah, there's a word for it.
You mean for funds?
Yeah.
No.
Did you put them in a certain like account?
Like an escrow?
Yeah, escrow.
No. I just wired them the money. But I'd been working with them at that point, like for a while,
doing the samples and stuff.
Yeah, and they did work for other reputable brands, so I knew that they were legit and they had a history, and that really helped. I mean, in a large sense, they were taking a risk on me, somebody who had nothing kind of as yet, and so they were hoping I would pay at the right time, and that was just a lot of trust.
Yeah.
So that's why the networking thing was important.
Nice. And what's it been like since then, having a bunch of clothes in your house that like your kids can only wear so many?
It's like this.
Yeah. What's it like?
Yeah, but it's in boxes. I mean, it's that. So I tried not to have the kids touch them, but it's like it really is like this. Like you have a whole section of your house. It's just a small business, essentially.
So you pack them and ship them out then in little poly packers?
It's cardboard.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's all, you got a whole area, like I said, of your house that's devoted to it.
Yeah. What's it been like kind of logistically? Because I'm mostly selling in person. I initially wasn't selling at all. And then now, if anything, I sell in person because it's like you really build relationships. And like, it's funny, I'm like, man, like in Eugene over time, like people will see each other in it and be like, oh, that's kind of like a community of some sort. That kids don't really have community though. So it's not like worth doing of like only, it's like kid sees another kid, but.
Yeah, the selling part has been like a real challenge. It's been interesting but hard. So like I have a website and I sell directly through that. I've also done in-person events, like small kind of pop-up style thing, or going to like a festival, so like a fall festival or a Christmas festival, that kind of thing. That's been another way to reach people directly. But it's, honestly, the best like advertisement is people wearing them, and then either other people seeing them or social media. That's the best way to reach people.
Nice. Yeah. And so, like, I don't know how into numbers or like how vague you want to keep it, but it's like, it's an interesting, because I'm just in the very similar position where it's just like, and mine are like one of one where I can't post it. And then it's like, great, it's just one posting that stays alive. It's like I would have to post each different one. So but Kenzie's kind of a proponent for online. A lot of people obviously are. Like the world.
Like direct to consumer.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, you can capture the most margin that way. So it's the most appealing instead of selling to somebody else who's then just going to mark it up and take a bigger.
Or just doing pop-ups, which is like very time consuming and
so
like a lot of planning. You got to find it, and it's a lot of that type of logistics versus like setting up a process that can then be just like repeated over and over and over, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Going back, would you do shirts again, or would you do like, adult shirts instead? Like, thoughts on like someone who's this deep into doing a kid's shirt?
Well, I'm planning for a second launch, so I'm going to do long sleeve shirts next. If I were starting from zero, I don't think I'd do adult clothing. I feel like I know kids' clothing better, which is kind of odd to say because like I wear adult clothing. But I have a sense of like what I want from the market there. And
That makes sense.
And I just haven't thought about it as much with adult clothing. Both marketplaces are really crowded. Like there's a lot of competition, especially online, for eyeballs, and it's hard to convert people from social media likes into consumers. But this is the one I feel most passionate about. That's what I'd say, where I feel like I can make the most difference.
What's it like targeting kids, essentially? You know, it's funny to think, but because we worked for a nonprofit that had youth like under 18. You can't really, and you don't really want to run the ads.
The marketing terms sometimes get a little bit like, ooh, I don't like the sound of that.
This age kid doesn't buy for themselves. So you're like essentially talking to parents and just saying like, do you do like any sort of spiel about like polyester or cotton, or do you say here's a cooler shirt than your kids wearing? Because it is also aesthetically more pleasing than most clothes.
Yeah, and the pitch is exactly to the parents or to the people in their lives who would buy them something kind of special because the price point's a little higher. So,
and what is that?
These sell for $32.
I feel like that's not that much, like higher compared like in today. Like really, it's like inflation is lagging behind in a lot of people's heads of like just thinking about how much everything costs. I'm like, shirts cost $30.
Yeah.
I guess maybe not kids' clothes, but no, it seems like kids' clothes kind of like weddings or like certain things where it's like marked up just because it can be.
Yeah.
It seems like kids' clothes, like hypothetically, it uses so much less fabric.
Does this
but it's the same amount of stitching
type of like fabric? How does it deal with like stains and stuff?
It actually is really great with stains.
Is that part of why you chose like this specifically, or did you just want something that was like lightweight? Because I like how silky it feels for cotton.
Yeah, I wanted something really soft, but it as an added benefit,
stretchy.
It just ends up like being really resistant to stains, and they come out really well. Yeah, it's another thing that's great, and the pattern also helps with that too because it's not one color.
Totally.
So,
yeah, they're very cute. I love the like different designs.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been a labor of love, but it's super fun. But yeah, to go back to the targeting consumers, like you're just trying to make a pitch to those people about why they would want to make this purchase and something that's kind of special and out of the norm. And that's really what you're trying to do. And it's so hard to compete with fast fashion. I'm sure you're fully aware of that. I mean, a lot of the consumers today are just trying to buy something that they're going to wear for like a month, and then they're fully expecting to throw it away.
Well, and kids almost have to throw it away because I don't know, like how long does it take for a kid to grow out of one of these? Do they buy it oversized and then they fit into it and then it goes away after?
They can. I mean,
it's a good question.
And kids grow at different rates. So some of them can wear it for at most a year, but it might be 6 months, 9 months.
Wow.
It just depends.
So with kids' clothes, you burn through clothes and shoes.
Yeah.
Because like Kanye made infant size and kid size Yeezys, and I'm like, it's still a couple $100 for a pair of shoes for a kid that I'm like, they can't possibly wear for that long.
Yeah, and a lot of brands are doing like resale things, sort of like what, for instance, like Patagonia does it, where they buy back and then resell. They have a secondary market on their website because kids do go through things quickly, and I think that's part of the sustainability pitch with this is that you're not just buying for yourself, but you're buying an item that is an aspiring hand-me-down. It's supposed to be passed on to another kid, and that's how you should view it. It's not just going to be thrown in the trash.
And do you have like language like that on your website, or like essentially over pitching is something that I'm like kind of aware of? It's like, it's surprising.
Some things do have so many good qualities that it's like, okay, I got to pick just a couple versus like all of them, you know?
Yeah, the angle that I am focusing on now is mostly about like the aesthetic difference and sort of like the creative designs. In this pattern, it's really emphasizing things that are in a kid's daily life that'll be all around them. Things your 2-year-old can talk about and your 4-year-old can talk about. Not something that like a parent wants them to have on their clothing. The sustainability piece is sort of secondary. It's there.
Kind of a bonus, a little cherry on top kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, people who are buying at this price point usually expect a sustainability aspect unless they're buying like something that's designer, because that's just sort of what you would expect at a certain price point. But yeah.
And so there's 2 different sizes or more?
No, there are 3.
There's 3.
Yeah.
It's like, do you just do them by age almost, or like,
yeah, we have no idea how anything in that kid realm. We're not versed.
It's roughly by age, but it depends on the kid.
Yeah.
Nice. And so when you said you're doing long sleeves, you're like, if I was going to go to scratch it, like, because you're already in it somewhat, do you still have fabric that's at the factory? Like you have this, like more of this? Did you buy it by pound and then essentially they're just going to make it into like a longer sleeve cut, or?
No. They, I mean, they might have had remnants that I don't have with me, but they just printed me and guaranteed me a certain number of a certain number minimum, and then they gave me, they had some extra fabric and made me some extra shirts. So they just told me we're going to produce at least this many, and then we might produce some more, and then they have, I think, probably a couple that didn't pass muster, and then they'll use that for whatever they use it for, but that's it.
Because that's a lot of what I buy as first quality is like the first, like when they're teaching the stitching. Because like, yeah, every shirt is slightly different in terms of them. Like, and you think of how many places there are to make a mistake in making sure, it's insane. Like much like you say, you don't know sewing. I'm like, I don't. Yeah. But what little I have sewn, I'm like, God, to get everyone perfect where there's not like leftover thread. There's not like you have to lock the thread a couple times where it's really obvious. Like there's so many chances for a mistake in making a shirt. It's insane that places can make it. Like, and not fuck up half of them, really. Yeah.
And it's, I mean, they use those other ones as like the samples that they'll send out for other things. You know, if you want to test the quality of the fabric, you know, then those samples don't need to be perfect. But
did you do any tests of like just throwing one in the wash like 50 times in a row? Yeah. Because that's one thing that I've been like on the, like, funny enough, I should have, when I bleached, really I took a big gamble because I wasn't certain that they wouldn't eventually break down. I thought I developed kind of a method where it doesn't damage the fabric. It just kind of changes the dye, but it's not like left on it long enough to make any sort of impact. That was over like a process of the initial ones. I think I ruined like 12 shirts, and then I ruined some hoodies. Like I just like so many pieces of clothing would get destroyed, and then instead of being big holes in the actual cotton, it'd just be at the seams on a couple of them. And I got like less and less to the point where like now I think there's none, but I never just washed one a ton of times. So how'd it go? Like I mean, there has to be some sort of fading or like
yeah, it does. The colors will fade a little bit. I mean, I think that's true with most shirts, particularly if you wash them like most of us do with other colors. You know, they're not only with their own colors, so it can get like a little faded or a little like darker. It's not quite as vibrant as the way I'd describe it. But overall, it holds its color really well. I mean, again, that's part of what you're paying for with the quality is something that like sticks around.
And really just the amount, like, I mean, you can see on the top there, you see like some screen prints. I started, before I bleached, I started by screen printing, and like, I really liked having designs all over in like odd spots. And it's really time like consuming to add screen prints. So finding a way where it's added to the fabric first, like just in mass.
Yeah, that'd be kind of nice, actually.
And then, so just essentially props on like kind of figured, did you go to Peru to like see the factory at any point?
I haven't been. That's a goal of mine because I'd love to see how it's made and learn more about the process and really meet the people who are doing it. Yeah. But I haven't gotten there yet.
Nice. And so I don't know if this is something you're currently like passionate about or you were and you're keeping going. Like what are you passionate about day to day? Like maybe lawyer stuff, maybe clothing, maybe something that's neither of them. I just want to like when people come like not just pigeonhole and be like you're this person, talk about this the whole time. Like, you know.
No, I mean I'm passionate about my day job, but this is such a fun project that is like meets a totally different need. It's like creative, but it's also strategic. It's something that I feel like I can do sort of with my kids, which is really fun. So it's something to connect over. Definitely. And it's, you know, I mean, being entrepreneurial is just wild. I mean, it's fun. It's crazy. It's the Wild West. You never know what's going to happen. You don't know if it's going to work. You have to be kind of crazy to do it because, again, like if you knew everything that you were going to go through when you started, you probably wouldn't start. But so it's really fun. I think I really enjoy it. It's hard. It's hard a lot of the time. I'm sure you guys have seen that with your own businesses. But
we've just been thinking about the concept of that lately of like every startup or every entrepreneur like says it's hard. But like what does that mean? Just like people not believe or just like not understanding what that means before going into it. Because you have managed to keep a like successful job throughout it. It seems like that would kind of like pave over a lot of any sort of like rough times hypothetically.
Yeah, it's a drawback and it's a benefit. Like obviously it provides you with a consistent income. You have some stability in your life and something that's like kind of predictable. And then this is like the crazy gamble, but it's definitely like a side gig. And so the downside is that I can't move as fast as I want to move. I can't put as much energy as I want to into it, but I can keep it going and I can do it myself financially, which is also really nice. I don't have to rely on somebody else. So it's like it's moving, but it's moving slower as a result. It's just a mixed bag.
Sometimes that can be good though. Yeah. Honestly, just like a nice steady crawl is much better than like the, you know, really crazy roller coaster of like, see how it goes. You know?
I feel like I'm building a house. I'm just doing it really slowly. That's how I would describe it.
I like it. It's a blessing that also you enjoy you said you're passionate about your day job. Yeah. But like, I've never really talked to a lawyer in my life. So more like, and I'm especially a lawyer who like TV shows portray them as like tired, like dead of just like, you know, of just like just having done so much. So meeting someone who's like enjoys it, like the legal system, just interfacing with bureaucracy would be pretty like disarming over time of just like, who cares about anything? So, you have a lot of life in you enough that you're doing cool stuff. Like, what is it like to be a lawyer?
It's a lot of work, but I don't think that's unique to lawyers. Like, a lot of jobs are time consuming. I think it can be really fun. Your day-to-day changes all the time. You're kind of constantly answering new and different questions. Since I work in-house, I'm working with one client consistently, and I get to know the business really well, which is fun.
So you're on retainer, like with where the word comes from.
Sort of. Instead of being like at a firm, I'm an employee of the company.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I work for the business. I'm one of their full-time employees.
It's really nice to know one business really solidly. That's definitely been an interesting thing for us, is like going from being W-2 employees at one company and marketing and doing all the video for that to
being an agency.
To being more of like an agency or a firm where it's like, okay, we have like a few businesses that we know way too much about, which is like,
but not
it's really
quite
fun.
as much about as like, you're just like being wholeheartedly in it.
At the end of the day, like when you start dividing your time, it always can be.
How long have you been at wherever you're currently at?
I've been there for a little less than a year. And then before that, I was in private practice. And it's been a good shift. It's been fun to work with like other people who aren't lawyers regularly. That's an exciting change for me.
Because they come to you as like the sage counsel of who knows about it. You're not like surrounded by a bunch of other people who everyone has probably an assuming opinion on. Like, that's fascinating. That must be really nice.
Yeah, it's nice to learn like their business well and like get to know those people and work with them again and again instead of having like a bunch of different people that you're constantly catering to. They're just different paces.
When you say it takes a lot of time, do you mean like you work more than 40 hours a week as a lawyer, or like?
Sometimes, yeah. Usually in private practice, that's the case.
What are some examples? Like, take me back over a year ago. What was it like? Because I mean,
it depends on what you're doing, but if you're in trial or if you're closing a deal, that can be like, 12, 15, 16-hour days, all day, every day for weeks.
Yeah.
It just depends.
It's riding on a lot. If it was like a legal case, it's like if you win or lose it, that's like one single decision moment. I assume, do you see it coming a long time beforehand? Like, this is probably like lost or won, or is it like, who knows? And then boom, you hear back and it's like, oh, those past couple of weeks were well spent, or you can't really like, and like, how does resume work? Like, do you have like amount of cases taken on, amount of cases won? Like, really, like what's you've lived a very different life than us and a lot of people. Like, what's the deep knowledge of being a lawyer,
Well, yeah, so the kind of like metrics of success vary depending on what type of lawyer you are. So I was a litigator before I was in-house, which meant I did casework. I was trying cases and helping clients with litigation. So I wasn't doing deals. And so usually litigators will measure success by the kind of results that they get. So if they win at trial, or if they get certain motions granted to them, or if they settle cases at a good point that they can like talk about publicly, then those are the metrics they'll use. But client happiness too is another way, to the degree you can quantify that.
Because you get word of mouth.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I'd imagine that.
So you go from one word of mouth to the, just because sometimes you turn, I'm just going to put the mic right there.
Sounds
Perfect.
good.
So if you had to keep one and like lose the other, would you go all into clothing or lawyerism?
That's so hard. I mean, I don't know. I think about that regularly. Like, if this took off and I was able to do it full time, I mean, I'd probably jump into it because I knew I could go back to law.
So you can take a while off?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What a joy.
Yeah. I mean, I probably couldn't go back to the exact same thing I'm doing or, fully retrace my steps, but it's a skill that you have. And so you can just go back to it at some point later and, revisit that part of your life. So
that's the dream. All jobs should be like that, where you can like take time off, because we're just at a place in life where we're like, should we be applying for jobs? And it's just like, how to account for like time in life when you're doing like, I mean, like if you went and did an entrepreneurial kind of start, like, and it was just even successful to like some extent, but then you're just like, I did, like, the lifestyle's too, like,
it's not what you want.
Not what you want or whatever. Just going back, just like, America's weird, and I like all, you know, like, I mean, I'm glad that we have the opportunities to start businesses, but it's like, you know, just the system is just ingrained so much, like just online applying to I don't know. Do you apply for jobs like normally? Like when you got this one, did you just like apply on, like, were you like any of us?
People say is like, once you get your job is to start looking for your next job if you want to, like, you know, leverage and like keep moving up. It's just something that some people say. So is that true?
I think you should always be looking. And that's not a reflection like negatively on any of the jobs I've held. I think it's just wise to be aware of like what's out there and what you might want for your current job. Because sometimes seeing what else is out there, you can say like, oh, that's a skill I want to build. I didn't know that's something I could do as a lawyer. And so now that I've like seen it, I can try to get my current role to like add that on or whatever. But it's also a good idea just to be ready in case something happens. If you lose your job or whatever, you have a sense of what's out there. You're not starting from zero.
So being a lawyer is pretty much like anything else. It's just another job. It really is. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. I always thought it was like all these ethical and moral dilemmas, and then like you're like, you know, like it just seems like a lot. So it's interesting to hear. It's like, it's just a day job.
Yeah, there's
like,
a lot of shows and movies and things that just depict lawyers. So.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably watch stuff all the time where you're like, that's not real. That's not how that would go. Like, I imagine, like, you know, like, I mean, anytime you see a musician, if you played like any instrument, you're like, that's not even remotely timed up, like queued up, like the strumming of the guitar and whatnot.
Yeah, it's not as sexy as it looks like on TV.
Is it not?
No,
it's all
fun,
behind. It's not like live cases. Like that's a small amount, or like in the court is a small amount of the time.
Yeah, a lot more of it is like behind a computer, alone at a desk.
I've heard it's a lot of reading.
It's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Yes.
Has like AI, like not to like bring every conversation there, but like has it made reading, like finding stuff a lot easier? Like it seems like it would make like, especially deep AI, the Google's like research one where it like takes 20 minutes to come back with an answer.
Yeah.
Like has it been useful? Just like, all right, I'll ask this then.
It has some utility. I don't use it a lot in the role that I currently have. And I think lawyers in general are very cautiously moving forward with AI. They're really scared of it, in part because there have been some bad examples of it existing and people trying to rely on it too much and then getting garbage as a result.
And like how much about like your current role can you say in terms of like if it's not casework or you're like your in-house, like is it any sort of industry or like anything, like any level of specifics in terms of like
so I work for a timber company, and they make wood products as well. And so I do their litigation work. I help them with that and work with our outside lawyers to manage those cases. And then I help them with employment work. So if they have any issues with their employees or have questions about like compliance with employment law, I help them with that.
Fabric of the house. Like in terms of like what like cotton makes fabric, it's like wood makes a house. You're in a similar like, you know, the thing that makes the thing kind of industry. Yeah, fascinating. So you just want to like make an impact physically in some way. I respect the hell out of it. Like in terms of digital, when you're like most of your time spent behind a computer, it's so meaningless feeling, isn't it? It's just not. It doesn't feed the soul even in the slightest.
Yeah, it's very different. I think part of what I like about this project too is doing something that is physical, because so much of my contribution to my job is like ethereal. You know, you're giving advice, you're writing something, but it all sort of like lives online. It's not something that at the end of the day you can look at and say like, I made that.
You can hold it in your hand and say, wow,
I have all these boxes. Oh god, like something to do. Like it is also like a big like, what did I get myself into? I assume like how many boxes do you have when you say it's a part of your room?
I think I have like 6 to 8 like big plastic tubs, sort of like those ones that you've got down there.
Okay, maybe the Costco 50, the Costco Black and Yellow tin. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, but they're, I mean, you know, little kids' clothes are a lot smaller than your sweatshirts.
Some of the sweatshirts are kind of meaty.
Yeah. They look cozy though.
They are.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I mean,
it's pretty.
So here's if you're curious like what they are, that's a fun example of one.
This is enormous.
Yeah, so this is a hoodie that Kanye made for DMX's funeral.
Oh wow!
And you can see I have 4 that aren't bleached at all.
Yeah.
But like so it has a double layer construction, which is fascinating.
So the seams are on the inside. That's really cool.
I know, having all hidden it's funny. There's shirts that he does that with too.
Oh, here's where they finish it. Yeah. Okay.
And sometimes in some of, because the double layer shirt she's wearing, it has fleece on the outside and then jersey lined on the inside.
Nice.
And there's like one little place on the arm that the sewing goes out instead of in.
And is it a full sleeve or a half sleeve or something?
It's pretty much a 3/4 if you're massive, but like it's supposed to fit oversized, so it definitely goes down to like the end of my arms.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try it on if you want.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I might not take it off. This is beautiful.
Isn't it?
Where are they? Oh, and it's got this too. Yeah. Where are they made?
So in the U.S., what was American Apparel, Dove Charney went and started Los Angeles Apparel, and these are not like for sale ever. They were just one-off for Kanye's Sunday service, his like church thing, and this was for a funeral aspect of it. But it was still like each one of these is one of the choir members there. They didn't make any more, and then after it, like I have those yellow and that light blue. Those are each just piles of like 6 or no, they're in piles of 6.
Yeah.
But like on the tag, they're numbered like with and some have names like of the choir members. So it's been pretty
fun.
Definitely pretty interesting. But it's also made it like actual genuine scarcity. Like a lot of brands have like a fake scarcity behind like this product, but then knowing it's like that's like they just don't make more of those. And also a lot of the Yeezy Gap just items. Like I mean the pants I'm wearing right now and the hoodie, the zip up she's wearing. It's like for whatever reason when Gap liquidated, they just sold it to people like pallets of it to people.
Yeah.
And I really like the quality, so just knowing it's like, if this might not be available anymore, because I'm buying ones with small stains on them.
Yeah.
For less. But the small stain, I figured out a method to cover it with the bleach.
Nice.
Right? So it's like...
That's amazing.
Yeah. Because I'm like, there's no way I could... Like, I think those retailed for $160, and a lot of the shirts retailed for like $120. So all those black shirts right there are these Yeezy long sleeves.
And they bleach so interestingly.
They look great. Wow. And do you do this with like a spray bottle? How do you get this effect?
I've gone through so many. You know, the amount of like spray and squeeze bottles and like just like a 5-gallon water thing. With, so like they're actually like labeled and stuff, but they didn't come with the neck tag. Like there's some that do, and funny enough, the samples are higher quality than the other ones. Really early in doing this, I didn't know how to remove the bleach smell enough. So every once in a while, I pull out of shirts that I like slightly smell.
Yeah, this one kind of has a little bleach.
But then over time, I learned like the biggest like piece of laundry advice that I learned is Dawn dish soap.
Yeah,
works like wonders.
Yeah, that gets everything out.
It does. But then I'm like, oh my god, it's so many clothes to rewash.
Yeah,
but, like,
and then refold.
And then refold. Yeah. So I'm like, but really, it's something I should do eventually. But selling it's been interesting because I'm almost doing it in the style of like a drug dealer where I'll meet with like someone came over and they just picked out what they wanted and then they want some screen prints added to it. And then the other time I've sold it was in person where people just kind of come up. It's just one-on-one.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, it just seems like online would be so much work. And I don't like, how are you like measure, like you mentioned earlier, the way that you measure success as a lawyer or like, have that on your resume, but like, so say you bought all these and then say you sell them all, like how do you have, but maybe you don't make that much because you didn't mark it up like a crazy amount. Like you made enough to keep it going. Yeah. It's like, how do you use that to then even be at the next, like show
what's your definition of success?
Yeah. What's your plan kind of forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the first definition of success that I'm trying to hold on to is like, does it make me happy? Because at the end of the day, like this is a project.
That's a great goal. Good for you. Honestly.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I'm devoting like my resources to it that are outside of my day job, like, is this something that is like making me happy? And if it's not, then I need to like think about like, well, how can I tweak it or what can I do to make myself happier about it?
Is it making you happy?
Yeah, it is. I mean, working on this second run and getting another design finalized is super fun. It's a really exciting part of the process. So like that, it sort of feeds my soul and gives me that tangible, I'm making something
learning,
fresh.
get design, you're learning a new field. How many different samples and then feedback do you give of how many cycles?
With the factory?
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll usually send me blanks that are just like white shirts that are made so I can see that the actual sizing is accurate. And then they'll send me 1 or 2 samples of the print before they do the full production. It depends usually on how many errors there are and how many corrections when we need to go back and forth on that. So it just depends, but at least 1 blank in white and then a full print. and then we go from there.
Nice. Has it gone off like without, have you just said like full stream ahead, or like have you had to like figure out how to communicate like, oh, I actually want this to be like a half-inch wider down here? Like, have you like, you know, what's it been like, and have you had to actually be like, no, this is not what I want, please don't make 1,000 of these?
Yeah. I would say like working with a professional like clothing designer is paramount. Like is so helpful because especially because I don't know the industry, like having somebody who understands a lot of things and can help make sure I like am giving the feedback I need to give, and then preparing what's called the tech pack for the factory so that they have all the measurements they need and details, so they know how to sew the tags on the inside, or they know how to like do the little clothing loop for the hang tag and what type of tag should be, you know, that kind of stuff is so important. So,
a lot of little details.
Yeah.
That can be really fun though, honestly.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it like I said, it's exciting. So I enjoy it.
Just like, you know, if you want to like think about interesting like design and stuff to do, like once Kanye lost all his deals, he had no factory behind him. This is like the next piece of writing. Let's see, I bought this one. I had a hole, not a stain. But what he did in order to sell it for $20, you can clearly tell. So there's no seams.
There's like one.
It's just
a poncho.
Yeah.
And then he saved the money just by.
That's interesting.
It's a really and then all raw hem. It's like a fascinating idea of like how to essentially. But it's a good
produce
fabric.
Something with like very minimal,
like bare bones
versus like this. It has all these different seams versus this is just one.
Yeah,
which is it's just an interesting idea.
Yeah, you know, it is. And
I don't love the fit though, I will say.
How do you get these? Like, how did you even come to find that you could buy these?
Yeah, so on Depop, that's the beauty, and that's why when I was saying like overselling something, like Kanye doesn't do it, and LA Apparel kind of does it, but Kanye, any of his ones that have small hole, stains, Sunday service when they're done, first runs, he backdoor sells through Los Angeles Apparel's Depop. So Los Angeles Apparel runs a Depop where any clothing, rather than just throwing it away, because it's like, and it's more like they sell mostly blanks and stuff. So it'd be more understandable of them. It wouldn't like degrade their brand integrity, but like Gucci and like like a lot of them, like if they have a bag or like any sort of thing that has an error, they don't sell it for cheaper somewhere.
Right. They just destroy
it, which is like, that's like a big problem. Like when you think about how many like, you know, kind of things can go wrong and how many you have to go through to get like the right design, it's like ends up being quite a bit. So they sell a ton of clothes on their Depop. And I initially was buying these double layer hoodies. So I got into it all by buying one Vision hoodie where like the only marking Kanye has on all of it was right here.
Which is such a fun tag.
Yeah.
And if you feel like it's really actually like different than other hoodies.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's like, that's like the heftiest sucker out there. And then so I was just trying to find a place where can I buy these? It only came out in one color and
very limited.
It was just for his 2020 presidential run. It was so limited that the first one I got was $300. And I was like, I didn't even have any shoes that were like that much. I had nothing. But I'm like, because I was buying Gildan. I had Gildan hoodies and shorts at the time. Like, if I'm going to be doing this, I should like get one example of what's the highest like level.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, oh, okay. So what matters isn't the screen print designs I'm putting on it. The fabric matters.
Yeah.
The seam, like the cut and the fabric and the pattern matter more than like anything else.
Yeah.
Like the designs at least. Especially I was spending all this time screen printing like 20 designs
by hand. It wasn't like with the machine, like the standard way of doing it, because all of the things like he would put on would be like on the sleeve or it'd be like right here. So it's like it's a lot harder to get it to configure like the machines that people
so it's like
use.
Quite a bit of time per sure. And essentially I just have a shit shirt with cool designs on it. Like they're glow in the dark and like what I'm wearing. You can see on a fair amount of them. Man, I thought I put a light. Nice. If you kind of like point, like put this between your eyes, like right here, and then like look up there in the corner. At that corner.
Over there. Oh yeah.
It like reflects quite a bit.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. So like I went for glow in the dark and retroflective, and like really you can do some cool things with still water-based screen print.
Yeah, you can.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea that type of stuff existed, and I'm obsessed with it now.
Yeah. It's like screen printing like retroflective on everything lately.
And you're doing it by hand, so you don't have one of the giant square machines.
Yeah.
Oh, like
so you can see the. And
we'll have to pull up a video before you leave.
Like the pallets and stuff. Instead of like getting those, I just cut plywood. And like every year it's gotten better. You can see like on the front is like starting a couple years ago. That's what I used to use. But like I really just became enthralled with all cotton, so no polyester, and then also just higher quality fabrics. And so I heard about it by chasing down a more like reasonable way to buy these double layer hoodies, which you can see on the bottom there.
Nice.
Then I had so many clothes that I couldn't screen print them on.
Yeah.
And then in comes the bleach. But yeah, it's like a way to add designs much like yours to like the entirety of the piece.
Yeah.
With, I mean, it takes so little time compared to screen printing or tie-dyeing. I did it
or
like,
sewing or,
yeah.
like embroidery or anything kind of like that.
And did you have a printmaking background? How did you get into this?
I wanted to make really cheap clothes, like my own clothes. I wanted I'll just like a cheap way to make my own outfits.
There's no background in it.
Yeah, no, they'll be unique.
You went to school for kinesiology.
Yeah, yeah. But I started the podcast, and I was like, I'll make like just a shirt for the show, or just like my own stuff. And then I just enjoy physical, I did something. Mm-hmm. That feels good. I'm like, it's so much time spent on the computer that each year in the summer, I'm sitting inside, seeing it sunny outside. I'm like, I have no it's not logical for me to go outside and do anything.
Yeah.
By all financial logic, I should be inside doing something, but it was killing me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be tough.
It just, I'm like, I got to come up with some reason to be outside more. So it's been great.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been and much like you now at the differently than you, but at the selling phase, just I'm like, for me, I'm like, I don't want to give up my favorite pieces, but then I'm like selling things that I'm like, I still really like them. They're just not my favorite. But it's like the nice thing about all of one is you can stand behind all of them the same way. Mm-hmm. Whereas I stand by every single hoodie and shirt to a different varying degree.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Yeah. It's hard to give them up when they're one of one.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been an oddity, but
and you can't just order more.
No.
Yeah.
But in terms of the quality of this is almost similar to this. I don't know if this one's Pima cotton, but a lot of LA apparels, the non-Yeezy samples.
There's
really
a lot
soft.
of variation in cotton, which I had no idea. I thought cotton was just one thing. And turns out it's incredibly versatile.
So here's how the majority of LA apparel's clothing feels. Mm-hmm. So clearly, but they have the manufacturing in the US. So clearly they he essentially just orders nicer one, or I don't know. But it is nice that the cotton's grown in the US. It's sewn. I've noticed one thing with all the samples, they leave strings really long. And so I have to I literally have just right here, just tons of little ways of cutting stuff.
Interesting.
Magneted around as I'm just going around. I slowly do it, but clothing's an interesting beast of a thing to think about.
Yeah. And if they're made in the US, I assume the cost reflects that.
Yes. On their site especially.
Not
if I
as
wasn't
bad as some brands do though. I feel like LA apparel's relatively affordable for the fact that it's because it's cotton in the US, right?
Yeah, cotton's grown in the US, sewn in LA.
Yeah.
And they just one of their biggest things that they're
more premium for sure.
About.
They're more than a Walmart shirt, but they last so much longer and they feel so much better, and it's really nice to have your money going towards something that's in the US. I feel like it's always nice when you can do that.
But it's ironic that a lot of people don't like Dove and Kanye. Both of them are hated figures. But then I'm by business people logic, I'm they're doing something that's good for the environment, good for US workers, and they're not, and good for the environment by also not throwing them away, by backdooring them. They're doing everything logically that I'm a good business, doing good business. That's good for everyone. I'm they're doing that. But everyone hates them. So it's a really kind of interesting thing. To just admire someone who's a villain in the eyes of many.
So will you order more from LA Apparel?
I have one more shipment coming. I've kept
oh my
saying.
Gosh, you said that a lot.
Okay, so I had bought in some stocks. So we make money through photo and video primarily. Mm-hmm. We had some we worked at Arcimoto, and then we worked at a nonprofit, and we had some funds. And I, instead of a small amount, I'd put in all my money into triple leveraged ETFs.
Okay.
So almost stock options.
Yeah.
I was up quite a bit.
Bold choice.
And I spent all of it on clothing. Mm-hmm. And I'm the addiction, it's not even an addiction. It didn't quite end until I was I'm actually in debt from having just gone a little too far. I don't know how much this whole process cost you, but it's it takes quite a bit of money to acquire a lot.
Or to create something from scratch, what you did, which is really, it's cool.
But I would order more if I was able to.
Yeah.
But like,
just fill the whole house.
Yeah, like physically I'm running out of space, and then and mentally and emotionally, like bandwidth wise, I'm just like, okay, I gotta like finish bleaching the ones that are bleachable, like screen print, and like just sell them, because I'm like, every time I do, I'm like, oh, I love this, I would never want to sell them, like, and I have to just be like, there's an end to that. I'm making these ones to sell, and I'm like, so all those bins, I'm like, cool, I'm okay selling those ones, but then everything else in the room, I'm like, I don't want to sell that for like, you know, but then there's a price on everything. That's the whole other tricky part. You know, if someone's like, oh, like some exorbitant amount for like one, and eventually I would, but kind of like similar to you, like doing more runs, I'm also trying to build up like credibility of people who've bought it and being like, oh, the fabric's so great, it's worth buying a better piece. And then because I'm like, I don't want to let the better pieces go for more inexpensively early. I don't know.
The repeat customers are essential. Like, those are the people who will talk about how good your brand is, and they'll come back for more. You know, I mean, my customers also grow out of their clothes, so that helps me with that turnover. Yeah. I mean, the downside of quality is also people will tend to buy fewer of whatever it is you're selling, which is good, I think, from an environmental standpoint, but it's also means, you know, they're less likely to go buy like 5 of your shirts at once. They'll probably buy one.
Yeah, it's an interesting just difference of doing like children's clothes versus adult, which I had never really thought of.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
It's a lot to think about. Everything's a lot to think about. Like when you're a lawyer and you do this, I'm like, even though this is really close to what I'm doing, there's so many differences that it's like really kind of interesting. And then like we're all living such different lives. It's hard. It's hard to just be like, we all meet up and we're like, yeah, we're all in the same headspace with this. But realistically, I'm like, if I like either like, just thinking of design houses and manufacturing, because that's where my mind's at, is hopefully just partnering with one of them. Just saying, this is what you should do with your clothes that don't work, is here's how you can cover up stains, really cover, like, you know, as just being like, man, when I go talk to those people, they have such a different understanding of what the typical process is like of working with a design, because you're essentially a design house. Yeah. Or like, you know, you hired one person as the design house of 1, 2. Do they get a % of every clothes, or did you pay them a lump sum?
No, I just pay them up front. Yeah.
Nice. That's nice.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, people structure their deals in different ways that works best, but I
You're
think
a lawyer. You got it. Nothing on the back end. You're below the line.
This is the most straightforward. I mean, you know, that's what Michael Jordan did with Nike, and that was enormously successful for him. So taking a percentage works really well. But for me, I think this was how I wanted to do it. So
definitely seems like it would pay off in the long run, more so.
It'd be more like if you hired a famous designer, they would have enough kind of like probably like sway to be like, well, I'm not going to do it unless I get a percent, is my understanding. So you found like a nice middle ground where it's like, it's still your thing. No one else gets a partial say on like how you, like, cause you know, it's
feels good to own and be like the sole person who gets to make decisions. That feels really good sometimes.
But just spread things out so much where every decision would be hard to make too. And, you know, unless they're local, like live next door and you can talk to them. It's like, we're all being Zoomed to death and emailed to death and texted to death. And it's like, I don't know. I've started noticing that I'm like, if I see messages, I'm like, oh, I don't want to open it. Like, kind of like how, like, at some points in life, you might be like, I don't want to look at my bank account, or I don't want to, like, you don't want to do something. Yeah. Like, I've been, like, not even wanting to look at, like, message chains and stuff. I'm like, God, that's not good.
Feeling exhausted by it.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have, like, I mean, being someone who's also, like, just still in the workforce traditionally, do you think that the economy and the world is in a precarious place? Like, do we have a skewed, like, saying how we all come from different points of view, we have a kind of skewed point of view where we're doing a lot of B2B customer acquisition at the moment, and just like seeing where like nonprofits are and companies are like 3 to 5 years ago financially versus now, it's like places are quite tight. But I'm curious, like, what's your experience? I should really be asking every guest, I'm like, what's the job, like, what's the economy and job market like, you know, in your perspective?
Oh, I think it's been rough, obviously, the last few years. I think it'll be rough for a little bit longer, in part because the proposed tariffs will have a pretty serious impact on how much stuff costs.
Ooh, maybe even you, or are they part of the NAFTA or whatever?
Peru has free trade, fortunately. They have their own agreement, which is super nice. But for people who are producing in other countries, that might change. And, you know, we buy a lot of things that are either completely made in China or are made in part in China. And that is just going to drive up cost a fair amount. And that's not great, but maybe people will turn to making more in the U.S. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. Or they'll go to other countries, like they'll turn more to Latin America or somewhere else.
Is the tariff something you're aware? Because I know Oregon exports a lot of lumber, and they probably export it to Asian countries. So are you it was interesting to hear tariffs be the first thing you bring up, essentially. Like the majority of people who probably aren't lawyers at places thinking about laws, like they just think small, like scale. You're thinking about what change is going to be made and then what the future is looking like.
Yeah.
So does that kind of like where your head comes from of like exporting stuff and then like importing because you have you could say, oh, if these were manufactured in China, what would be, I assume, is something you've thought about.
Yeah. I mean, like in terms of like, where am I going to want to produce my second run of clothes? Am I going to want to stay in Peru, or am I going to want to go somewhere else? And in looking to Asia, if they're going to be,
thoughts with that?
I'll probably go back to Peru because the tariffs are going to make things complicated. It might actually slow down some of the trade, which would also not be great. So
West Coast, they have to go through the Panama. No, they don't. East Coast. China to the U.S.
Yeah, okay. But it's, it's just something to consider as you're thinking about, like, where am I going to buy something? Or, like, if you were buying new packaging materials, you're like, well, is this made in China? Is this going to be marked up now? Like, little component parts, both in part of my day job and in part of this, you're thinking, like, the cost of, like, everything's going to go up, or a lot of things.
Cool. So it's good that I haven't sold a lot of clothes, because the price of things are going to go up is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And you can keep your prices where they are, or you can go up to match inflation. We'll see.
And I don't have price. It's essentially, I'm like, people are like, well, take what you spent and divide what you need. I'm like, I put everything and plus some into it. And, like my lifestyle is in flux, depending on how much we have, like in terms of like how much we can put into other like ventures and hobbies and or like back into our business. It's like, it's all so in flux that it's hard to do that. Like the cost of yours is quite straightforward. It seems like you can do a like amount of time spent, amount of money spent. And like you can kind of like, I'm curious how essentially you did come up with a price, if not.
That's so tricky, and it's a hard question to answer. In part, like the typical process for fashion is to mark something up by, if you're selling it wholesale, double, and if you're selling it direct to consumer, quadruple, because you then, if you sell wholesale, you can still half the price you sell to the person, and then they can mark it up by double again and still get a profit. So pretty much anything you buy in a store that was made by a business that's not that store is like costs a quarter of the cost to produce. That's the rough rule. Selling direct to consumer, a lot of brands have built their businesses on keeping their prices low by not doing wholesale, and then again trying to capture more of the margin and also keep some of the price down, kind of meet in the middle. And so I tried to do a blend of that. Wholesale takes so much time, and it's really relationship driven. And so, I mean, once you have it in place, it can be really successful.
If these were in Walmart, it'd be over.
But getting there is hard.
Yeah, totally.
Element. I understand that.
Obviously, it's
hard. I was
going
to say, you're doing that right now.
Yes.
It's hard to like, you put so many resources into like just getting the business in the first place.
Yes.
And it's customer acquisition in just a different format. Yeah. So, and selling in stores can be complicated. Sometimes they have buyback provisions in their contracts. So if they don't sell a certain amount of clothes, then you have to take them back or buy them back from them. So it's just risky in a different way. So
interesting.
Yeah. The appeal of direct to consumer, it's easier. It's a little more straightforward in some ways.
And so is that room in your house just the boxes, and then you just have all your packaging stuff in there, and then you have a label printer, and you get an order, you just boom, pack it up. That'd be pretty quick and easy, if you have the whole process.
There's definitely an appeal to like the direct to consumer, but I'd assume you'd spend more on marketing versus
shipping's $10 per though, like really.
These are so much lighter though than your clothes.
These are smaller. They're smaller and they're lighter, and so like I can keep shipping like my shipping costs down, but you're right. I mean, shipping is not cheap.
No, it's really not,
and that can add a decent amount to a garment. I mean, if you're already spending $300, $10 doesn't feel bad, but for this,
it does. No. If I spend $300, the $10 does feel bad.
You're like, I shouldn't have to spend this.
Or it's like I try to bundle things or different
it's
stuff.
An interesting kind of marketing perspective of would it be better for my customers to just have that price built in because it feels more like seamless versus
feels way more seamless.
Yeah, versus like, okay, I just bought the garment and now I'm like getting nickeled and dimed. It feels like sometimes I feel.
Yeah. And then the caveat is like if you allow for refunds, then you're paying shipping. And you
refunds is interesting.
Yeah, so I'm just like, oh, it'd have to be no refunds. Otherwise, it'd get so confusing so fast. I'm curious, do you do refunds or?
Yeah, I do, but I don't have one of a kind pieces, so I can also do replacements and do other. It makes it a little bit different. I mean, your clothes are kind of are a cross between clothing and artwork in a way because they are one of one, and so it's really different in a way. I can just mail somebody another one, and the print might be in a slightly different position, but it's essentially the same.
Yeah, and it's hard. All the fabric is different. All like the thickness. It's surprising like you chose between fabrics for this. You probably know better than most people. Like they could both be jersey, but like one could be 18 by 1, 30 by like in terms of the thread count and the thickness. Like 2-ply. It's like there's so many subtle differences. You picked a good one. I do like it. Yeah.
Some brands use fabric like that for like pajamas because it's super soft and like a little bit
other brands use polyester. What are you I mean, like
some of the nicer kids brands do. Not all.
I was gonna say, go to Amazon and look up pajamas. You find me one result that is cotton and not all poly. It's everywhere. It's really like hard to.
It's hard to avoid for sure.
Yeah.
Not to like call you out there, but I'm just like, well, like it's just like that's a dream world where it's like most pajama or like Yeah, I'm not obviously like kind of joking, but it's like, man, this would be a nice thing to make pajamas out of.
Yeah. So what's in like the future plans for you?
Future plan in the short term is long sleeve shirts, and then I'm hoping to expand into like related pieces like dresses, pants. Pants are more technically complicated, so that's
sizing wise.
I was wondering
exactly. But like sweatshirts or jackets, other things that you'd sort of build a whole outfit.
Are you going to do matching shirts for like kids and parents?
I would love to.
People have told me that,
we've had some people talk to us.
It seems like just making an adult size of this one.
Yeah.
People
like to match.
People they're like, if I could have bought a matching pair for me and my kid, they're like. So I mean, here's me telling you, like relaying that to the other side of it, of like if you can change the sizing. Yeah,
matching is really in right now in every kind of garment you can imagine. So people love to match their kids. It's fun.
But you're staying away from adult clothing.
Right now, it's just You want
to build up like an empire of like first kids and then maybe if anything. Okay.
Yeah, and like I think people also want to match in particular contexts. Like your clothes are really fashionable, and I think they might like having that like really cool look. I think some people also like matching their kids with like family pictures or pajamas, specific things. I don't,
that makes sense.
I need to know more about the market before I like went in that direction. So
you two, you think a lot more similar than me. I'm like, I didn't think of if there was a market for any, like really realistically, I was like just very, a random bet sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like just a hunch.
Passion.
Just passion. Yeah. And again, it was never too, like, I'm just running out of space physically. like I'm just like at a place where I'm like, okay, too much I couldn't wear this in my entire lifetime. Once I realized that, I'm like, okay, some of them have to go. But yeah, man, it's just tricky. Don't you want to wear your own shirt? Like, it seems like you'd want to do adult size just to like wear your own.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. It would be fun.
And you sample in large, just like a one-off. It's just like might be able to match your kids. Yeah. There's one of one.
No, that would be fun. But it's fun enough seeing them wear it too, and knowing that like that's something I made.
Yeah, and you have a heart out at like 5:25.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but we're good.
Beautiful. And then, so I guess what advice would you have? Like, I'm curious. If you'd be up for it, like you have a lot deeper thoughts than anyone who's like, even like I've explained it to people for like an hour and they've been like, so you buy Yeezy knockoffs? Like, that's what I get at the end of it. And I'm just like, okay.
So you're trying to rip them off or like, people don't get it.
Kind of, they're not knockoffs, but they're sample, like, you have so much knowledge about clothing further than the average person. And me, a year ago, I just wear any polyester shirt and be like, feels good. Realistically now I put it on like poison. It's like itchy in a weird way. Like, what are your thoughts on, what would you do if you were you moved into this room and just had this and be like, that's how I feel.
No, I don't know. I mean, again, like the sales strategy seems like it's pretty different because your pieces are so one of one, but it gives you a lot of like content that you can use for selling online if you want to sell through social media, and like you have a lot that you can showcase, and I think that's really great. And you can really showcase the process of how you get there. It seems like you could also do custom work if you wanted to. I mean, then you'd have to work with people on what they want instead of what you want, which can be tricky.
That's life. But, if I've learned anything, like video work wise, it's like we almost all are, like the majority of our work has been client work since we started doing it for work. It's like you kind of stop doing the hobby at a certain point. So it might kill my like clothing, but I'm like, I'm okay for it to be killed. Like I'm not planning to be clothing for my whole life. This is not like what I'm staking my personality on. So if it got killed and I had to develop another thing, I'd actually be okay with that. Yeah, maybe. I guess that was the one person. Someone has wants to make company clothing. He went to Threadbare, just a place in town, and he was like, first he got blanks tie-dyed by a friend, and then put like screen printed at Threadbare, and he was like, the designs came off after like 2 washes. I was like, it's hard to like really know. He's like, could you have done it for longer? I'm like, my prints last forever, but I'm not doing it on like tie-dye. Like I don't know what process or like how many washes did the tie-dye go through, because if they just washed it once on cold, and it's like, I'm like, maybe the dyes. So it's like way too in depth, like in terms of doing work for other people that's like this much physical. Like the nice thing about digital is we can undo, like it's like just time wasted, whereas rather than it's like, shit, one of us has a bunch of product we don't want. I'm like, so this seems like kind of
the product versus service element of deciding like what business you want to do is always interesting.
I'm blessed that if I'm stuck with all this, it's something I wanted. Like I bought every piece and that's the other thing, I only have large.
It's an interesting sales element for sure.
Like there's a lot of really interesting caveats.
I mean, but then you have like a narrow group of consumers you're trying to sell to. So like, who your customer is. Like you're not trying to like make it for everybody. You know the person you're trying to get to buy. And that can be really nice in some ways.
Absolutely.
Like you get to very specific 2 to 4 year olds, like boom, like that. Yeah. So cutting it down a lot does help, doesn't it? Wow. Yeah.
It's, it's mixed again, but your clothes are also made to fit loosely. So I think that gives them some flexibility.
That does. So it's surprising the amount of like guys who are like, I just wish it was tighter fitting. I'm like, really? Do you really? This is not for you then. Like, but yeah, no, I was just really interested in I'm trying to find the Dove shirt that was double, I guess I put it over there. But essentially I'm like, were you into clothing before this? Or like, I've grown into learning about the subtle differences in like cut.
Because you came in with a nice fit. You have like a nice coat, a nice little bag and
Thanks.
Stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved clothing. I feel like clothing is such a big part of how we feel about ourselves. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy necessarily, but like liking what you put on, I think is important. It can reflect how you feel. And sometimes that feeling is like, I want to be cozy and at home. And sometimes that's like, I want to be fancy. But it's such a daily part of our expression. And that's that's what's so fun. I mean, like, and for kids, it's one of the limited ways they can often exercise their own like agency and like be in control. Is like, what do I want to wear today? So it's fun to like help give them that choice.
Absolutely.
And I like doing it as well for myself. So I've always liked it. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I was not aware of it earlier in life. It's very impactful. Yeah. Like to your happiness and well-being. It's like people probably don't like to think that like what has a stranglehold over their happiness and health and well-being, but it's like I just became aware that I'm like, oh, clothing was making me uncomfortable for like 20 years of my life, like just wearing partial polyester or just like random things. It's like you just don't even want to think that could be a contributing factor, more or less the whole entire factor of like why you're just like uncomfortable. Clothing is like impactful. Yeah, wanting your kid to be comfortable. That's a noble kind of journey you went on of being like, I want kids to be comfortable from a young age.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps them focus and be present in the moment. Just like with us, if we're like physically uncomfortable, like it's so much harder to focus and do whatever it is you're trying to do.
ADHD goes down thanks to your clothes. Like, I fucking believe I haven't even thought about like because I haven't thought
the implications,
of
the
kids'
ripple
clothing.
effect.
Yeah, like seeing all these kids in polyester. I'm like, well, if I was wearing polyester, I wouldn't have an attention span. I was just like, just like wow, you've opened up a lot of kind of new like areas of thought, which has been very fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, it's always fun to talk with somebody else who like cares about clothing deeply because not everybody does. People often are like, I don't care what I wear. I just get dressed in the morning, or I wish I had a uniform, which is a phrase I don't understand, but
funny enough, I was like that for a while, where like when I bought the Gildans, I bought all of one color, and like before I'd screen print them, I just wear a bunch of blanks. I'm like, there's an easiness to it, but once you have the luxury of having multiple pieces you like, I think people who say that don't have any pieces they like, and there's like, I just wish that I could just like have, and we have way too many decisions in the day, like we're decisioned to death, like yet again. But no, I really like just wearing different random stuff. It's been a blessing, and a curse. I don't know what I'm into. I don't know where I mean, 2 years ago, I didn't even have a shoe. Like 2 years ago, I wore Skechers and hand-me-downs.
Yeah.
A little's changed.
Yeah, I was like, seriously. And Gildans. Now I'm like, funny enough, in terms of like you mentioned, like people don't really care or like think about it. No, sometimes people are like, the Gildans, this is perfect. It breaks my soul to be like, take it for free. Because we're going to be like, okay, that one's expensive. I'm just like, no. I'm just like, it's really interesting believing in what you're doing or not. Like, it's a blessing that you get to enjoy like this. Like, okay, imagine you have those boxes, but you learn that like, the place made polyester shirts and just label them, like, you know, like you'd still have that. It'd be so much harder to sell, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
To not believe in it and be like, this is doing bad. Like, that would be a tricky situation.
Yeah, I mean, it would feel like it's not what I wanted to do. And, you know, and if people want to wear Gildans or whatever, and that's like the vibe they want, that's totally fine. I think for me, like the biggest part of it is like people being aware of what they're buying, both in terms of its impact on them and then on the planet, and then making a choice, whatever that is, you know, and doing it intentionally, because it's so easy to just be like, I don't care. I'm just like, want to go on my phone or whatever.
Yeah, I want less on my phone. That's what's led to all this, is just trying to get away from tech and computers.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to see, you know, how our different clothing, like where we each are in 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, I might be just cutting trees. I might be at a logging company. And you might be doing a podcast surrounded by kids' clothes. And then like one parent adult piece. Like, that would be funny, you know? Yeah, I'm doing videography for a logging company.
Yep. You might. I mean, there are enough of them here. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a whole other train. We're closing up. We're not getting on the logging. I'm like, man, I use wood for a lot of things. I'm like, do you respect wood? You've seen Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you respect wood?
Yes.
You must within the industry. Yeah.
True.
I'm just like,
It's in the interview questions.
Do you respect wood? I'd like it. Kind of like final like thoughts to kind of cohese all this together in my mind.
Yeah.
Is when you're like, oh, I want people to be aware of what they're buying and stuff. I agree in one sense, in an ideal world, if we weren't in it's the opposite of Fahrenheit, the Brave New World, where it's like there's too much information.
Yeah.
It's like when I think of buying wood, it's like you think of all the propaganda from both sides of like why, like, you know, logging's bad. But then I like, that's why when I stopped and I'm like, okay, logging another time. But to bring it to clothing is like, when I say overselling, it brings it back to like really an all in a bunch, because I'm like, like I'm not saying it's like all the selling points in my clothes online, because I'm like, I'm so like deeply exhausted by having a million things I should care about or like being told. So it's like just knowing which ones are the ones to do. But like I do think it's successful, or like people do it because it works. So it's like, I'm curious, like how running a website and like marketing it in different ways, like what's been success, because we met at Startups, we met at a startup thing, like, and hypothetically you could network with someone there, and like that could be like that is selling the clothes, is networking with manufacturers, you know. What's been like, you know, successful or highlight or like enjoyable, because the name of our real company is Good Marketing Works, like our LLC. So kind of bring it all back to like kind of how do you get rid of this? Like once you have a bunch of like something, how do you get rid of it? Isn't interesting.
I think for my brand, and I think this would probably be true for you as well, is like in-person sales, getting them to touch the clothing, feel it, because that's so much of it is like putting your hands on it and being like, oh man, this feels good. Like I would really want to wear this. So the weight of it is like what I want. I know this is going to be cozy.
Yes.
That's really important, because some of that can come through on a website with like good photography or videography, but it's hard to really do that without getting a piece in their hands and saying like, I want you to try this out and tell me what you think of it.
Because then it's like once something becomes an object of desire, people just want it.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe it's the in person it's worth doing no metrics or like, oh, this is made here or whatever. It's like people like the piece and then they just want it. But like online, maybe that is the place to like have everything listed, where it's like you do want rationale, because you are being like kind of like roped into like, I like see something on Amazon, then go Google it on Reddit, like just to see like, you know, what people think. So I guess I do like comparisons online. It's just in person. I'm like, don't preach at me. don't you shame me. Like, I'm just like, I'm tired of shame being at all involved in the buying process.
Yeah.
And it's not the intention of any of it. It's a bonus. Like,
Yeah. And that's the tact a lot of brands are taking. And I think that's why for me, like I haven't led with sustainability because I don't want the people to feel like they have to be shamed into buying clothes. I want them to like it and be like, oh, look at all these other benefits. This like aligns with so much of my other priorities. Like this is great. Yeah, because nobody wants to feel bad or guilty when they're buying stuff.
No, it's
not a very good selling technique.
No.
Well, I mean, a lot of companies, it seems like it's a lot of places.
Funny you see it as guilt versus just like a benefit. But I know what you mean.
Just because yesterday
totally
the show
understand.
with Jeremy, or just one of the most recent guests said, it's like, oh, it's like you're being shamed. Or like shame is a component of it.
I can understand.
Like, I want to be this person.
Yeah.
I'm like, am I living up to, or like, in the moment. It's, it's just like, rather than like leaving that and then going to Shen and buying something would be the equivalent of littering in terms of like you're doing an action into the world that does or does not represent who you want to be. And, I also want stuff to be like, people to be like, oh, I think that's cool and I want it. So like, it makes me happy that you've had the exact same like train of thought in terms of like, it's a weird marketplace compared to you think of all of human history. It's like trade, or it's like trade money for like, it hasn't been like price comparison. It hasn't been like a decade of people being overwhelmed with every marketing strategy known to man. Plus like it's all of these things. And then plus now documentaries talking about the industry. So unless you mention it, then people might just think it's probably like, that's part of the problem. So it's like some people might just be like, unless they explicitly hear you're the good guy, they might be like, oh, fashion, you're the bad guy. Like everyone's good guys and bad guys in life in other people's eyes, depending on like what they most recently read or saw, So it's just, I've just been toiling with a lot of these thoughts. So it's been interesting to just hear them. I'm curious, where you go. They're big, weird concepts that kind of like will play a part in every sale you do for like every interaction.
We think a lot about it, I think, too, just from the marketing perspective. Yeah. Like, when you know how the sausage gets made, it's kind of like, it's just interesting to think about.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have the marketing background that I think is probably going to be super helpful to selling some of this stuff. You at least know how to produce content in a really professional way. And that's been a huge learning curve for me. And it's, been fun, but it's not my like first choice for how I want to spend my time on the job.
Did you get a camera or did you go to someone or did you just use your phone? Because we've done all three.
Just use my phone.
Nice.
Great. Like with a decent enough iPhone, that the photography I did go to somebody and had like take official pictures that are on the website and I use in some of my marketing materials, but like day-to-day Instagram is just my phone.
People recognize phone filmed content. Like it seems familiar in a weird way.
It can be kind of honestly a good strategy for socials.
It seems like earnest instead of like overproduced.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, this feels edited. It doesn't feel genuine.
Or you just scroll past it because you think it's like an ad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, went on Joe Rogan and he said something that's like stuck with me more than any recent podcast, which is like production quality is like paired with it not being the truth or like authentic. They're the opposite. Like the higher production quality, the less authentic something is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it really, like you see CTV footage where you're like, this really fucking happened.
Yeah.
But it's low quality, but it's still interesting because something genuinely happened. Whereas you see a really highly produced something, it's like, well, they had to have a lot of thought behind it to make something that inauthentic, like a movie, like a well-made movie.
Yeah.
But it's like enough thought went into it that it's still impressive. So like finding that balance is an interesting thing. And I think regular iPhone footage works great. I just got a macro lens to try to get a close-up photo or video of like the fabric
to kind of show
like, the knit.
Oh, nice.
Because like a lot of this is like heavy ribbing, and I never used to think about ribbing, but I'm like, damn, like the subtle feeling of fabric, like you really does look cooler and it feels cooler. So somehow introducing that to the online is something I've thought of. So. Cool. It's 5:20, so let's hit your early out. We hit the ground running. This was like recording when we sat down. That was great. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Thank you for your time. I mean, I'm so excited to hear about how this goes for you guys. In part because we're like in the same boat, maybe slightly different boats, but on a similar journey. And so it's interesting to be with other entrepreneurs and hear what they're doing because it's kind of a crazy ride.
It's a crazy ride, crazy time, crazy everything.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with tariffs on like all the different little components.
And if anyone wants to check out your shirts or buy some stuff from you, where would they go?
Cloudroom.store. That's my website. They can find me on Instagram, Cloudroom Store.
Cool.
And I look forward to seeing them.
Sweet.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Easy.
All
Love
right.
it.
Bye.
Bye.